The Arthur Pieman Conservation Area is a very special place. For many thousands of years, this is where Aboriginal people lived. The land gave them all they needed. It provided them with food, shelter, tools and medicine. When the first white people saw this part of Tasmania in the early 1800s, there were 4 clans of Aboriginal people living here. Each clan had around 100 people. They were called the Perapa, Manigan, Tarkanina and Pedanidic. The whole landscape was important to our ancestors, just as it is to us today. The Arthur Pieman's huge coastal dunes were created over thousands of years as wind-blown sands mixed with midden material, including shells, bones, campfire ash and stone tools, left by our ancestors. Tasmanian Aboriginal Auntie Leonie Dixon shares her knowledge of living areas with Fiona Rice from Parks and Wildlife.
So here we are, Leonie, we're in the middle of a fabulous living area that your ancestors obviously came to a lot. We're surrounded by lots and lots of midden material here. Tell me about some of the things that we're finding here in this living area.
Well, as you can see, like just mounds of shells, and so obviously seashells, shellfish. Mm-hmm. This one we call a werrina, and it's sort of like shaped like a snail. And so they would collect these and bring them back. There's also abalone shells. There's also mussels, and with the mussels, they would have put those on the fire, and that would the heat from the fire would open up the mussel, and then they would just eat the fish from inside. Maybe even the abalone they would put on the fire, but then to get the snail out of this werrina, they would use a tool, maybe a sharp bone or a sharp stick, and then you just jiggle it around and you pull the snail out and you eat. So it's really quite tasty.
In the living areas, you also find animal bones, like wallaby and wombat, which the men hunted, and stone tools for cutting and skinning, all shapes and sizes, made to suit the task.
And so they use these as scrapers to cut the meat, to clean the skin off, because the edges are really quite sharp. Scrapers were really good because they clean, scrape, cut.
Multi-purpose tool.
Multi-purpose, yes.
Yeah.
The men hunted with long spears.
The men would go and cut those down, and they were usually made out of tea tree, and then they would scrape all the bark off, and obviously a pointed end, and then use those for killing the wallabies or possums or whatever. And so they were teaching the young boys that from an early age.
Parts of the country were often burnt to keep it low and open, to make it easier for our ancestors to move around and hunt. The new plant growth also attracted more animals. Women hunted too, for seals, which lived in sheltered coves and nearby islands.
They'd make what we call a hide, and so they would be laying more or less in wait for the seal to come, and as the seal came, the women would just jump up and they would have like a club or a waddy, which was usually like a fairly thick piece of tree they would try to get the root of the tree, which had sort of like a ball on it, so when they clubbed the seal, like it would really knock it out then
and they'd haul it back and they'd get their stone tools and skin it on the fire.
Cooked, tea.
Nice.
Plants were also eaten: seeds, berries, leaves, nectar, even starchy roots. Pig face is a common plant food along the coast.
We call it kani. You take the petal things off the flower and you eat the little bulb thing, which is really mushy and quite sweet.
So the fruit, fruit.
Yes.
Plants were also used for medicine. Pig face was used to treat insect bites and burns.
We just break off this, and because it's quite soft, you just give it a rub, and the gel that's inside. You can see it's quite liquid, and so they would just put that on their insect bites.
Good for March fly bites.
Yes.
Living areas were often near fresh water. To carry water, the women made containers out of bull kelp.
They would get grass and make a string and tie handles on it, and it would be quite large, and so the water would be gathered in the kelp carrier and just carted wherever they went.
To carry other things such as berries, stone tools and shells, the women made baskets from grasses and river reeds.
They're woven, they can be, quite large, they can be open weave or the tight weave, and then they would just put their food or the tools that they use, so that they, especially like the stone tools, they would carry those with them, and the food all in the baskets.
Our ancestors also built huts from tree branches and grasses to protect them from the rain and wind. The huts have disintegrated long ago, but you can still see the shallow depressions in the ground where they were, always near food and fresh water. White people that visited the area in the early 1800s made notes in their journals about what the huts looked like. Our ancestors also wore animal skins to help keep them warm.
So they would wrap them around themselves, and that would help keep them warm.
And also to keep warm, did they rub animal fat?
They did.
Yeah.
They rubbed the animal fat and all over them.
Ochre was used too for special ceremonies. It was collected from ochre quarries.
Ochre is women's business, and so only the women would go to collect. And it's like a clay, and so they would get it in big lumps. They use the grinding tools, the stones, and then they grind the ochre down into a very fine powder, and then they would mix it with the animal fat, and so make it stick. And I mean, you get different colours. There's the really dark ochre colour, and then you do get white ochre, and there's a yellow, so the colours are really beautiful. And then the men, of course, would use the ochre in their hair for a ceremony, and they would, make themselves more attractive for the ladies maybe.
As well as using ochre for decoration, the women made necklaces from twined grass or tiny shells.
I've seen some lovely illustrations done of your ancestors wearing beautiful shell necklaces.
What you see are usually merino shells, which are very, very tiny. The women would go and collect those. The shell is really like a pearly, lustrous, and so then they would string them, and the string that they would use is the sinew out of the kangaroo or a wallaby, and then thread the sinew through to make these beautiful merino shell necklaces.
Aboriginal people would often visit other clans elsewhere in Tasmania to trade food, tools or ochre, or to have special ceremonies, such as exchanging women in marriage. At the Arthur Pieman, people from other clans visited Rebecca Lagoon during black swan egg-laying season to feast on the eggs. Other clans may also have visited or helped create the special rock carvings on the coast called petroglyphs.
We like to think that, okay, they're telling a story or something that's happened and something that's been handed down, but unfortunately, we just don't know. And so, we have this mystery. We just like to leave it at that, and so, that's it, mystery.
Everything in the natural landscape is of value to us. Understanding how everything is connected and our ancestors' traditions is very important, because our culture was almost completely destroyed in a very short space of time when Europeans arrived just over 200 years ago. Many of our ancestors died fighting the white invaders who tried to take their land. They also died from white people's diseases. We are part of today's Tasmanian Aboriginal community. We've descended from our ancestors' relations with Europeans. We're working hard to rediscover our traditional culture to keep it alive and strong. We pass down our stories and our traditions to our children and teach them to respect the land. School groups sometimes visit the Arthur Pieman. we show them how our ancestors lived and how to make kelp water carriers and twine bracelets from grasses. One of our elders, Auntie Verna, says that if you spend time exploring the coast, you can start to feel the presence of our ancestors. When you visit, see what you can feel and discover about our culture.